for Commerce Brazil for joining us here. And this is going to be a very informal interview. So it's just a chat between us. I will present myself, and then I will tell Jean to tell you about his story a little bit. I'm an online retailer, and I have a furniture business here, furniture e-commerce. And now we're acting a D2C, so we are connecting the industry to the end user. And I also have a service provider company that helps multinational companies to enter the digital transformation. So basically, this is me. I'm one of the board members at e-commerce Brazil and responsible for the management, content, and auditorium. And I do a little bit of the role regarding the international affairs. And this is one of the challenges that we're asked to have someone from Tencent. And here we are. Okay.
There we go. And thank you so much for inviting me, Angelo. It's nice. I commonly just kind of ignore a lot of LinkedIn messages because there's so much out there. But then when I looked back and I saw the message from you, I was kind of excited. And this is it looks like a pretty big venue, and I wish I could actually be there in Brazil, and I wish we could be doing the event live. It's too bad, but we'll just go with an interview like this.
Okay, good. Hopefully in the future, when things get to the new normal, let's see how it's going to be in 2021. But I would like to have the opportunity to bring you to Brazil, to our physical stage. So let's talk about that in the future.
Sweet. Absolutely.
Well, hi, Kevin. This is Jean Macdis. We are very pleased to have you with us. It's a great honor. And we would like to say that we are thank you for sharing your knowledge with e-commerce Brazil community. Well, I'm an entrepreneur, comes from a traditional family, Lebanese family here in Brazil. 54 years our company reached, and we are online retailers now. So it's a transformation, a digital transformation from a traditional company to a modern one. I am a professor also. I have a master's degree, and I'm a professor and also member of the e-commerce Brazil, especially talking about the small and medium business. And we would like to share with you some questions about it, but I will ask Angelo to start this interview. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, so Kevin, I had a few chances in the past to visit China, and in most of the visits, I reached some companies and some executives, and I was surprised because most of them, if you're talking about a director role or a vice president or the head of any department, Alibaba or some other companies such as Huawei, they were all Chinese. And then we were surprised that you, being the head of global marketing at WeChat, because of the way the Chinese usually hire Chinese for this type of position. Okay, so what were your challenges to adapt in this environment, and which skills you had to develop to attend this specific role of yours?
Yeah, well, again, honored to be here on e-commerce Brazil with you guys. Thanks again for inviting me. And then great question. You guys know my background, but just a really quick background to answer that question. I've worked for basically two main companies is my main experience. And I've had the opportunity to work for Boeing in the US. So Boeing airplanes struggling now like everyone in aerospace. But a very traditional, a very quintessential example of an American company that's highly functional. And so what's nice about that is I got to compare kind of, I got to compare the very mainstream American company, and I got to compare that to working at WeChat. So I'm kind of lucky that I have that comparison so that I know what it's like to work at a main American company, kind of a standard American company. So then, yeah, so you're completely right, Angelou, that, yeah, Chinese companies don't normally hire foreigners. It's not common. The bridge or the gap between China and the West is huge. And that's why there's so much opportunity in that space, bridging that gap. That gap exists in politics, and we're seeing that ideology-wise, it exists. It exists in technology, the internet's really different there. And it also exists in the companies. And I did a master's degree, I did an MBA in China, and one of again, the quintessential case study is a joint venture commonly between a German company and a Chinese company, and they try to work out together, and they just can't. There's just too many conflicts of culture. The joint venture doesn't work. There's so many case studies of failed joint ventures for Chinese companies with Western companies. So commonly doesn't work, and then Chinese companies, a lot of them just don't hire too many foreigners. They'll have foreigners that are sales reps in other countries, minimal kind of back and forth, but it's rare that you see it in the company. So yeah, Tencent especially is very Chinese, and then WeChat was extremely Chinese, and I was pretty much more or less the only foreigner there, the only non-Chinese foreigner. We had one for a year, another one for a year and a half, but I was there for 4 years. So working in that situation where everything's really Chinese, yeah, it was definitely a challenge. It was kind of an enjoyable challenge. There was other parts of it is that Tencent's a very young company. So I did come from, as I said, Boeing, and Boeing, the average age was about 50 years old, 55 years old, very close, like sometimes beyond retirement. Tencent in WeChat, the average age was 27 years old. And I started there when I was 27, and I was already on the older side of the workforce. So a lot of people, they hire right out of college to try to get like the most innovative people, some really creative ideas. So there was also that kind of issue of being such a young company. It's even a Chinese culture. It's also a really young culture. But yeah, so working in a Chinese company, you pretty much have to speak Mandarin. Otherwise, you just get lost. You just miss out on way too much subtleties. There's a lot of subtleties. Even once you learn the language, there's a lot of barriers after that. But learning the language is the first step. And then once you learn the Mandarin language, once you learn the Chinese language, there's a whole second step of what's all those subtle cues, what's all those nuances, like certain phrases like that's going to be complex, or that might be a little difficult. That obviously means no, and there's a lot of subtleties that happen. So yeah, I'd say there's a lot of barriers in Tencent in working for a Chinese company, not just being Chinese. But all in all, learning a language is really important. And then once you learn a language, you can start delving into the subtleties of the cultural differences.
Okay, now how long took you to learn and speak Chinese? And were you able to discuss technically at the end of your experience as the global manager of Tencent?
Yeah. And it's funny, back on this note of kind of comparing it to Boeing, when I was at Boeing, when I first got to my first meeting, I understood about 60% of what was said at the meeting. Everyone's speaking English, but they're speaking in acronyms. They're speaking in business slang. They're saying, my PO, SSG, PO is purchase order, SSG was shared services group. That was a group I was in. And they just saying all these acronyms. Now, when I was at WeChat, the first day there, I had already spoke about fluent Chinese from about 5 years of study to being in the country. what I thought was fluent Chinese, and I did pass the highest level test, which is called HSK6. But the first day when I walked into the meeting, I understood about 30% of what was said in our first team meeting. So I understand maybe like 80% of the words, but I couldn't really figure out what the heck anyone was talking about. And people speak really fast. And in a Chinese company, in an American company, it's more back and forth. But in a Chinese company, the meetings are a little more presentation. There's not so much question and answer. You got to just kind of pay attention and figure out what they're saying. Yeah, it's a lot less back and forth, which makes it a little more difficult to understand. But yeah, after about 4 to 6 months of learning most of the business slang and the terminology, and especially Tencent, it's a pretty insular company. Not many people leave Tencent. It has a high retention rate, so they have a lot of their own terminology there. And I'd say after about 6 months, I could understand about 90% in the meetings, and then I was presenting in Chinese. You can definitely get to the point. It's not so incredibly difficult. At the end of the 4 years, it was easier for me to talk about. You guys were saying digital transformation. It was easier for me to talk about digital transformation, Chinese technical aspects in Chinese than in English almost when it came to the China tech world. There's a lot of terms that exist in Chinese, but not really so much in English.
Okay.
Congratulations, my friend. I imagine how big it was, this challenge.
Oh man, it's so huge.
And especially because you are adapt and be successful in this challenge. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Ask you, how do you see the future of the retail? Because the post-COVID world, which sure it's a world with even greater adherence to technology. Do you believe that the future of retail is highly linked to super apps? Here in Brazil, for instance, we don't have 1 or 2 consolidated super apps in China. We have a more fragmented reality. How do you see that?
Yeah, so great question. Yeah, great question, John. I think what I see is a future of retail. What I think is a pretty core aspect, even above this whole idea of future of super apps, is in China specifically, is the idea of authenticity. So for Chinese, authenticity, knowing that something's real, knowing that it comes from, knowing that it's quality, knowing it's the real brand is really important. Taobao is the original, or like Alibaba and their entire kind of ecosystem and empire is the original force, the original engine behind China's entire e-commerce kind of miracle. But then new competitors came out like Jingdong, JD.com, that could enforce, it was more vertical, and it could create, it made sure that there was less fakes, because in China, counterfeit goods and fake goods really is commonly a problem, and people are always afraid they're getting something fake. So authenticity is really big, and that's where WeChat, that's when WeChat created mini programs. That e-commerce experience was really focused on authenticity, making it so that you could buy directly from the business with none of these, what they call, I think they call them like they're little distributors. A lot of on Alibaba is a lot of distributors, but these were supply chains that were completely controlled by the brands themselves. And it made it so that users would know that when they bought something at Burberry, when they went to Burberry store and they scanned their wall and they got their official account, they followed Burberry and they were able to buy them from them directly with a mini program, they knew that that was a real product. When it comes to super apps, yeah, they're starting to pop up everywhere in China. WeChat invented the mini program, which is mini program allows for apps within an app, and it allows for an app to be an operating system. And that was invented by WeChat, and it still has generally the best experience. So a lot of all the other apps are kind of starting to put them into their own apps. I think ByteDance does one of the best jobs where you can see a product in a video and you can click on it and buy it right away and jump to a mini program and buy it right away. But originally mini program wasn't just for e-commerce, it's for everything. And mini program is about making it easier for brands to kind of have their own apps that aren't so big. And that's where the authenticity comes in, where it's not just a little storefront, it's a little app for the brand themselves. And they know that it's Burberry style, they know that it's BMW style, and then they know that that's a real product and that's a good e-commerce experience.
Yeah, that's very nice. And if we are going a little bit deeper on the retail perspective, do you think that WeChat was responsible for accelerating the penetration of the online retail in China to, I believe, the highest level on earth? And do you think the payment functionality that was embedded into the app also empowered consumption through these means?
Yeah, so another really good question. So the history goes, and I'm obviously biased because I work for WeChat, so I won't be saying WeChat's the answer to everything. So again, this is retail. The retail miracle of China is truly, the bulk of it is truly an Alibaba story. Alibaba is all retail. Tencent's always been social. They're very much the Facebook, in a way, of China. WeChat itself is kind of a mix. It's like WhatsApp at the very smallest part in the beginning, and then it just grows out from there with PayPal. Facebook is their moments and a lot of other aspects. So the retail real revolution would have started with Alibaba, and that was just a traditional e-commerce platform. But man, it just even kind of goes beyond my knowledge how it became so powerful and so popular. I think it's just the incredible scale of China, the massive middle income market, and then also the incredible manpower that's willing to make kind of ship things from one place to another, to make logistics so cheap so that you can buy something online and it's free, or you can buy anything online, it arrives pretty much the same day, and it's 25 cents shipping. So the original revolution really begins with Alibaba, Taobao, etc. But I think, especially when it comes to payments, that still begins with Alibaba and their Alipay. But Alipay was able to get about 400 million users. And so it all begins there, and it gets pretty deep. But I do think that WeChat and WeChat Pay really accelerated this revolution and brought it to a place where it wasn't just a little bit beyond the rest of the world. It wasn't just beating the rest of the world. It was on an entire different level. So I think the US mobile payment penetration is around somewhere like 2-3%, maybe even less. In China now, it's 80%. And Alipay, yeah, so that means 80% of all payments in China are mobile payments. And Alipay has 400 million users, but WeChat Pay now has 800 and 900 million payment users. So this revolution, this kind of digital revolution and mobile payments revolution that really began with Alipay and Alibaba and that ecosystem, WeChat really deepened, and I guess also broadened, because where it was originally a maximum of 300, 400 million payment users, WeChat Pay brought on 800 million in the end. So it just got every single person connected to payments. And then now, so when it comes to something about $20 and less, pretty much the very long tail of payments, that's where you see WeChat Pay dominate. And then the larger payments, you see Alipay do better in the market. And in general, it's just kind of seen as Alipay is the more secure stocks industry standard, but then WeChat Pay has become convenience and everyone has it. So you might as well use it. So yeah, that's, that maybe goes a little bit more into the comparison of the two, but yeah, definitely WeChat Pay, very much in WeChat, in the ecosystem, in those mini programs, which created kind of an entire new kind of purchasing experience online, have all contributed to that revolution. They're all just continuing. That's why China's is flying ahead of the rest of the world in terms of mobile payments.
Very interesting, because even we saw a video here, even beggars receive.
Yeah, right. They'll show their QR code.
Wow, it's incredible. It was viral here in Brazil, this video. Let me ask you, how do you see the interactions of super apps with local businesses, especially small and medium? It's interesting for the super apps to develop this relationship with the small and medium business, local business, or there is a trend for the super app to become a giant supplier. Just even because they have access to all consumption habits, to all potential demand, well, they have all data about it. Is there room for local business in this new economy?
Well, that's a great question. I think, well, with the super apps, how they work is they're very much platforms. So the entire strategy behind Alibaba originally is very much a platform. So what Alibaba did so well in the beginning is they were incredibly profitable because they didn't own any of, I guess, the supply chain or really too much of the logistics. They just put a platform and then businesses came on and sold to each other. Now you look at Amazon, that's a very vertical strategy. They start buying some of the basics. They start being a supplier on their own platform. They provide the logistics. They do a lot of different aspects. The purpose is to control quality, but you also just have huge asset investment. Alibaba in the beginning was all platform. Tencent, in China, you see a lot more of these platform strategies. Jingdong, JD.com, the competitor to Alibaba, they're more vertical, kind of like how Amazon is. They own a lot more of the supply chain, of the logistics chain. But Alibaba, Tencent, some of the bigger players in China, the platform strategy is a little more popular. You don't see people normally controlling the whole vertical chain. Just, I think it's almost just because China's just such a big scale platform. It's generally enough to have the platform strategy. There's just enough players where you can be profitable. You don't need to do more than just be the place where everyone meets together. So that's commonly Tencent's strategy. So with these super apps like WeChat, I think one issue is, and this is where you're talking about like local businesses and small to medium businesses, commonly developing an app for a small to medium business is a little over the top. You know, you're a person that designs dresses and you sell dresses. Well, you're not going to develop a whole app. And then even a mini app is a little too much. You just want that digital storefront. So what has happened here is that the super apps will have another platform on top of them. And they're called third-party platforms, and they're called like third-party providers. And what that is, it's kind of like your Salesforce or Oracle, where what they do is they sit on top of Tencent platform and they help businesses get into these different mini programs, get into these different super apps with their own mini program. So then you have businesses that can just pay a template fee, and it's kind of like Wix, just making a website. You can make a mini program in a super app that allows you to sell things on the different super apps in China. So this has allowed local businesses or small to medium that don't have the development ability to make their own to just buy some templates and then get into these ecosystems. I think brand loyalty is still pretty big in China, and what I talked about with authenticity, because that's still a big thing in China, that's why medium businesses or retail can still exist and still be strong, because content is still really strong. So you have all these platforms, you have super apps, you have all this technology making it easier for transactions to happen and empowering those transactions, but you still have really high brand power in China. People want Nike, they want Burberry. So that's why I don't think super apps will rule the world. I think there's just a new technology, a new medium for people to get together.
As a retailer, I'm very concerned that my business depends on a third party. If you were a retailer, would you invest in the relationship with a super app or seek to develop your own ecosystem?
You know,
Tricky question.
Yeah, it's a tricky question. It's a good question. I mean, I suppose the smart business move is kind of an in-between of the two. Whereas what you do is you start with a template. You start with a third party that can provide a template, and then you slowly go from there. Well, ideally, you don't have to, you're in a situation where it's not a marriage with the third party. You don't have to have a big divorce. You can simply kind of move on from that third party or template. I guess the equivalent for me would be, do I develop my own website? I think the website metaphor is pretty simple, pretty similar. It's, do I develop my own website, or do I use Wix.com or like, or a different template, WordPress? And I think starting with the template, and then as you grow, seeing if you have testing that, and then seeing if there's enough demand to make your own. So what I would do is I would use these third parties that provide templates and things, kind of make things easier. And then if that does work, and it does work for me on the super apps, then I'd potentially invest in more. And the reason why I say that is I don't think the super app atmosphere is right for everyone. When authenticity is really important, and when interaction is really important with consumers, then it's smart to be on these super apps where you can have highly functional, kind of complex interaction really easily. But when it comes to just straight retail, like especially commodities like milk, like milk brands or cereal brands, there's generally not too much interaction that you need to do with the consumer. That probably just being on traditional e-commerce would be enough. Yeah.
Okay, there's a huge buzz about the trade challenges between US and China. And you mentioned during our interview about let's say the sub apps, right? And I believe that Apple was kind of bothered by WeChat because they almost replaced the mobile phone's operating system. Okay, and they recently they launched this installing sub apps where you can develop your own app. And do you think that would become an actual operating system in the future?
Yeah, I think. I mean, yeah, I think when we made originally the idea, and a lot of people were wanting to call. I guess when these mini programs first came out, the relationship with Apple was definitely a consideration. Are they going to see this as threatening? Mini programs, and when these mini programs come out and these super apps started to arise, the actual technology is nothing truly new. There has existed, for example, little games or Java games or within Facebook, so that you can play a little game with your Facebook friends, even within the Facebook app or within the Facebook platform. In a way, there's always been little programs on programs, but they've never been as complex and as sophisticated as WeChat, these mini programs, and all these new super apps that we've seen pop up. So Apple is definitely kind of it was interesting in the beginning. Apple just kind of looked away. They just thought, okay, maybe this isn't a big deal. And then it was only about 2 years later when it was incredibly successful. 1 million mini programs were online. Only once it was had some true, I guess, momentum did Apple go, oh, wait a second, maybe that's an issue. I'm not really sure if Apple will really crack down on WeChat. I don't think it's going to happen. I think with the U.S.-China relation, I think Apple generally, of all of the tech giants, Apple generally is really happy to stay as good, in a good standing, a good relationship with China. Google was willing to leave. Microsoft is kind of in between. Amazon kind of entered, but not too much, and they weren't really good enough with the government. Facebook has tried, never really got in, but Apple's done very well in China, and it's been, I think, their biggest market for a pretty long time. And they don't normally want to risk that, and I think the super app's success in China and in the Chinese government sees this technology revolution as kind of their own success in a way. They see it as the government kind of sees, oh, look, all of our tech is working. That means our government policy is working. I think the government would take it really negatively if Apple turned around. And it's almost smart that many programs are on all of the applications and not just WeChat, because now Apple can't really turn all of them off and turn off all of those mini program functionality. I think there would be some reprimand from the Chinese side of things if Apple did that, and I don't think they're willing to take that risk. Yeah. Yeah.
Here in Brazil, we are seeing a great wave of new companies called fintechs. But the market concentration is still great with the traditional payment issuers that have a huge economic power. Do you believe that means of payment can be decentralized, or in the end, traditional structures will dominate the market?
Wait, so John, I didn't understand, you said these new technology called feedback. Are you talking about blockchain or?
No, fintechs here in Brazil.
Fintech, sorry, I heard.
Yeah. Financial technology applies to a company.
Got it.
But, okay, so they are trying. So small, medium, very huge ideas.
Yeah.
But against the traditional structures. Mm. My answer is if the traditional structures will buy these companies and dominate everything, or we will see a change in this moment.
Really good question. I think that's a good kind of like hypothesis. Those are really the two routes I see. Are there going to be disruptors, and the disruptors will just end up winning, like kind of like Google has done. Google created Google Search, and it was just completely new, and it kind of changed everything, and now Google's huge. Or will companies buy it? I think some kind of equivalent is like, I think of like sustainable energy, and sustainable energy is the new one, and it would get rid of old oil. But now you see oil companies like BP, Shell, you start to see them having some of their own green technology, and they're saying, oh, we're committing 5%, 10%, et cetera. Well, I think we've seen some fintech companies, small fintech companies definitely start from one person, especially when it came to kind of e-commerce, cross-border. I've seen companies that are just one Chinese student in Singapore or Australia, find another one or two others, and then they start a company with 30 people, really young, just out of college, and then quickly go in the hundreds of millions. Actually, one of these startups, I think you guys have seen Wirecard in the news, the German company. They were they were managing a lot of the cross-border for WeChat and Alipay for Germany and Austria. And now seeing him in the news, it was really surprising because I learned about them while I was working for WeChat Pay and Alipay, or WeChat Pay, and in that industry. I think, and we also see in blockchain is another one. You see Bitcoin. We see that, and that's another fintech. That's a whole another fintech space, but in a similar aspect. We saw originally a lot of people really kind of blockchain and Bitcoin, and originally it was kind of synonymous with the dark web and people doing almost pirating online and hackers. But then afterwards, there was a little bit less fear, and after people started to get their mind around what blockchain was, you did really start to see businesses buy into it, and now we're seeing more and more businesses buy into blockchain and buy into not just the financial part of it, but also the digital assets part of it. And now there's now a new digital coin that is backed by large businesses. And that was all really hot 2-3 years ago, but we saw that now in China, blockchain and like Bitcoin and blockchain, that's really impressive because it's something totally new. When it comes to WeChat Pay and Alipay, it's actually not that new. WeChat Pay and Alipay just sit completely on top of the traditional banking system. Really similar to Visa or MasterCard, where it's not its own bank. It's a user-facing payment tool. It's a user-facing brand where you have a bank and then you have a Visa card which you can use. But in the end, you need to have that bank card. That's what powers all of that. Whereas like Bitcoin and a lot of you see in cryptocurrency, that's actually pretty different. That's all advanced. It's decentralized. It's outside of the banking system. I think WeChat Pay and Alipay and how huge these have gotten, I think that shows to me the benefits of something in the middle, where you have the traditional banks is what we already have now. You have something really futuristic like Bitcoin and blockchain, and that's been really slow to upkeep. WeChat Pay is taking traditional banking and then MasterCard, Visa card, and then putting that on a new brand that's attached to a digital ecosystem like WeChat and the Alipay ecosystem, and then enabling a lot of services into that to enable online, offline interactions, a lot of more online interactions, etc. That's in between these two kind of ideas of traditional banking and then all the way over to like something like Bitcoin. I think that interaction is what we will see in the future. I think we will see hybrid innovation. I think we'll see a slow progress. I don't think we're going to see Bitcoin being used everywhere in the next few years. I think it'll be a decade, 2 decades out, and I think there will be a lot of traditional meeting new kind of fintech related interactions in that short term, in that interim timeline. So yeah, I think we've seen a lot of fintech. Fintech was really hot these last few years, a lot of small companies, but I think it will be the traditional companies finally getting on board, buying some of the smaller companies, and that's when fintech's really going to take off in the West like it has in China.
Yeah, that was very insightful for me. I was learning a lot from this answer. If for the closing remarks for the last stage of the interview, I would like to explore a little bit of your idea. What do you think will be the future of the payment methods? What is your opinion about it?
Yeah, I think, let me think. That's a little general. Let me think. So can you narrow down the future of like Chinese payment method or just future of all payment? What do I say?
I would say worldwide, yes. This is a very general question. I want to collect from what you lived in a tech company and what you believe, where would you bet, for example?
Well, I think when I was in WeChat Pay, I was and as an American, I was so surprised. I always just think of technological dominance of the United States, of Silicon Valley, of California, and the U.S. has around 250 billion US dollars of mobile payment transactions a year. China has almost 40 to 50 trillion US dollars. So it's I don't know, about 20 or 50 times more. I can't even figure out the math. It's just so much bigger on such a greater scale in China. I think it's almost 200 times more. So that for me was really surprising. I think, and I think that for me kind of shows, when I was in China, what I saw was a bit of a vacuum for the rest of the world, where China was very far ahead in terms of payments and mobile payments, and it was helping their economy move forward. It was enabling better transactions. It's kind of like when credit cards were first coming out in the United States, and it really powered the economy to have the money moving back and forth so easy, and lowering barriers to commerce, lowering barriers to interaction. I think the rest of the world will just start to kind of look more like how China looked, because I think they're going to see the benefits of that. For me, that's what I thought was going to happen in the past year or so. But then with the US-China trade war and the COVID pandemic, we've seen a lot of eyes turn away from this. They're kind of, I think, because of the fear of China, the rest of the world is kind of losing out a little bit on that opportunity to learn from China and adapt and try to copy some of the same things they've done. But that's not everyone. You see, Mark Zuckerberg has said the past 3 years, he's continuously said, I want Facebook to copy WeChat. I want to copy WeChat. And he wants to make Facebook Messenger, everything more like WeChat. So he's been very upfront about it. He's said that to the media. And he's trying to bring out Lira, which is a little more, more of a digital coin. It's not connected so much. As I understand, it won't be so connected with the banks. It'll be more like a Bitcoin. It'll be more in the blockchain atmosphere. Once something like that can come out, I think we'll see things looking more like what's happening in China. But it seems to me like the world's going to take a little bit of time to figure it out and to kind of catch up with what's going on over in China. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Like as a synthesis of what you told.
Yeah.
It's like one coin to rule them all, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any further questions?
No. Even in the respect for the Kevin's time, I have no more questions. It was a very pleasurable time, very nice interaction. I would like to thank you very much for your time and invite you to do more times with us.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. Honored to be here, honored to be on with you guys, and this was an interesting experience.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. We'll keep in touch for the next challenges that we might have. And for sure, your experience is very rich for e-commerce Brazil. And hopefully we'll be together in the future here in a different way. Seeing you from the stage, okay? So looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Okay, até logo, meus amigos.
Até logo.
Yes.
Tchau e até breve.